To illustrate how simple the history of the survey of the Saugeen Reserve is when it is properly interpreted, I will summarize the whole boundary dispute issue in just a few sentences. The Saugeen Band of 1855 complained the western boundary was positioned incorrectly. Indian Affairs agreed, and the western boundary was relocated. As a result, the western boundary was no longer bound to Lake Huron from a due north straight line. It was bound to Lake Huron at Copway Road. By definition of the treaty terms, this affected the 9.5-mile shoreline boundary starting point. As a result, the 9.5-mile shoreline boundary no longer starts here and ends at midpoint Lot 31. It starts at Copway Road and ends at Lot 2526 Main Street. The explanation to this boundary dispute is no more complicated than that. It is the most consistent explanation using the available historical facts. Following this simple chain of documented events I have just described is the only, I repeat, the only explanation that allows for the treaty terms to match Charles Rankin's final map. Conclusive proof, Treaty 72 not only honored the terms of the treaty, but also honored the reserve boundaries Saugeen First Nation desired and believed they had negotiated in 1854. In 1855, the Saugeen Band had a legitimate boundary dispute. It was dealt with and corrected over 160 years ago, and the boundary dispute of today is no more than a manipulation of the facts and the truth. The Canadian federal government has been a proponent of the Saugeen First Nation claim to Sauble Beach for 30 years. Actually, they initiated the claim in 1990. They rely on a notation on Charles Rankin's 1855 draft map, along with the treaty text as originally written, to establish the intent for the Saugeen Reserve boundaries. It is most logical the notation they rely on was made before the Copway Road Amendment, and is not relevant in establishing anything that can be considered undoubtedly accurate. Also, the Copway Road Amendment significantly altered the original treaty instructions in determining the location of the western boundary and in determining the 9.5-mile shoreline measurement starting point. These are points of fact that Canada never thoroughly researched, and as a result, they came to incorrect conclusions. In spite of my best efforts to convince them otherwise, Canada still continues to deny the need to recognize the Copway Road Amendment in order to establish intent for the Saugeen Reserve boundaries. It is the combination of the Copway Road Amendment merged with the original treaty instructions that establishes the intent of the treaty, not the treaty text as originally stated on its own. The amendment is clear that the boundary is not bounded on the west by a straight line heading due north from the Saugeen River at the point where it is entered by a ravine immediately west of the village as stated in the original treaty text, but is instead bounded on the west by the Copway Road, which takes a northwesterly direction. These instructions must be carried out to establish the true intent of the treaty. When they are, the northeast corner of the Saugeen Reserve terminates at Lot 2526 Main Street, as illustrated on Rankin's final map and where it is today. It is not to terminate at midpoint Lot 31, where the speculative notation is located on Rankin's earlier draft map. If only the original treaty instructions are followed and the Copway Road Amendment is ignored, the treaty is manipulated and the truth of the treaty intent is altered.